Yeah, there's actually basically a profession of instructional designer where people specifically go about creating creating training
Yeah.
objectives, thinking about what's the best way to implement them and so on. And maybe while we're waiting, I can share one examples that I used in probably it was around 5 years ago or so. So we are working on pretty complex project where there's a lot of different calculations and different types of calculations. And once when our team had grown from, I think, 5 to 10 people, you basically face a challenge how to pass all the knowledge about different places in the system. And this was a big challenge for me as a team lead. So how should I go about spreading the knowledge? Because it's not possible to go through each piece each time and do something about it. So at that point, what I did, I just created a simple spreadsheet where I put all the pieces, all the different parts of the system, all the kind of sub-services, and just let people rate themselves how well do they understand this piece and whether they are able to let's say do some debugging, do some investigation in case there are any kind of things. And with that, at least I had at least subjective picture about their level of knowledge. And again, it was probably a bit geeky approach, but I was also able to create their personal development plan based on the number of points that they will get in each of these things. So kind of cumulatively, for example, they can learn plus, let's say, 5 points in different kind of systems. So this is a way to also to measure something. And it was probably hard to kind of try to codify each pieces of knowledge, but at least it allowed to have certain
have the ground, the basics.
Yeah.
I also use something similar without points or whatever, just columns, and I always called it cheat sheet. And I try to put as maximum as possible all the information that was relevant as global info for them to be able to start from that point and to be able to learn during the training everything around each and every point. But they already had like formulas, like for example, it's Cisco, all the commands and whatever you need to access the router or the whatever. And it was really nice to have that and to start from that, the normal procedure of the training and interaction of people wanting to learn, and the fact that they are motivated by this cheat sheet and they can also try to use it during exams or feedbacks or whatever. They felt somehow like a competence during high school or during college. So it was just regenerating their tiny little souls and try to make some connection.
A form of gamification as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the heroes, but on pieces of paper. The hero badges that we have at EPAM.
Let me check. Somebody was writing me. I tried to send the new link to as much people as possible. We also record it, but let's see how it goes.
We should cut that last 2-3 minutes out of the recording.
So just 1 second. And we can proceed. So at least if people were not able to reconnect, and I see that probably there are a bit less people now, so probably not everybody have seen it. But I don't think that everybody check their
emails.
Yeah, because like Meetup doesn't allow to say mass private messages, only mass emails. So let's see how it goes. So probably will people be joining us as well.
Hopefully.
Let me continue. So another model. So we stopped right before Nice people joined our meeting. So I was talking about this model, and again, it's important, and probably all of you or many of you know about Dunningkruger effect, where people think their understanding of the topic is much better at the beginning because they don't understand where their knowledge ends. So at first, when we at the first quadrant, it's important for us to help people understand what's the limitation. Again, everything ties up diagnosing their learning needs. So everything ties up, not everything, but a lot of things ties up to the previous models as well. So first, what we as managers can do, we can create either challenges, either tasks which are conducive to uncovering their gaps, at least if they are willing to play. So we can suggest a new type of things that they didn't do before, so they can understand what's the limit of their current level of expertise and understand what they don't know. That way they become conscious and competent. So now they already understand what they don't know, and they can choose what they want to do about it. I mean, sometimes people will say, this is not for me, I want to step back, and depending on the situation, we may agree to that as well. So once people start practicing and doing something about it, again, it's important for us to establish for them enough level of psychological safety so that they are able to practice. They understand that mistakes are right. So we need to normalize the mistakes and normalize the error and support as much as possible. Once we are transferring from the second quadrant to the third quadrant, it's important to start removing some of the support. So give them more autonomy, remove the scaffolding, and help them start owning certain things and start doing certain things on their own. Of course, it's important to understand where this distinction, and sometimes we may just check in with them and ask them how much level of risk, how much level of discomfort or novelty they are willing to tolerate. Because sometimes people will just answer like, I need this support, or I don't need this support. We may jump with some suggestions and advice maybe they don't already need. And of course, when they come into unconscious competence, we can be supportive, but again, give them as much as independence and autonomy as possible. So at that point, they can perform. They don't need any conscious attention to this. So maybe the only challenge would be if they need to adjust something, they might need to go again to conscious competence in order to adjust something in their performance, and then again make it automatic and make it unconscious. Another thing also very famous in learning development circles is COPE cycle. It's named by one of the learning scholars as well. It describes another model of how people learn, how especially adult people learn. So all starts and ends with concrete experience. So there's something we do, and we start with that. We have certain experience, certain situations. The next step is to reflect. So basically review, understand what's happening about them. Then we make sense of the situation. So we either create new mental models, either revise the existing ones, introduce new ones. So we build a new map of what's going on. We create a new hypothesis. We create a new experiment. We try it in practice. And this practice world, not only people give us feedback, gives us some feedback. And based on that, we can repeat the cycle. This is an important thing because again, when I talked about the nature of knowledge, I mentioned that there's a certain knowledge which is already codified and structured, and we can pass it. And here's the model is going to be the teacher and the student. But in many other cases, the real teacher is their experience and basically their practice. So in this situation, our role is to guide their learning. It's not to pass our knowledge, pass our expertise, pass our opinions, but more allow them to learn from what they're already doing, to be more of a coach. And here, the important point is to create these opportunities to reflect. Because usually what's happening is we're stuck in this first phase. We just experience something, we don't reflect, we don't make conclusions, we don't create new thoughts and new hypotheses about our performance, and we don't test it. We don't introduce anything new. And it's important that you can do for 10 years the similar stuff, but if you don't analyze it, if you don't find a way to improve it, you will be on the same level of performance. So it's not only the number of years or 10,000 of hours spent, it should be deliberate. And part of deliberate practice is reflection and create a new level of experimentation and trying this stuff. Simple model that you can use, three-step model is what, so what, now what. Basically, you can, with these 3 questions, you can help people reflect. So you can debrief any kind of situation. So what happened? What do you make of it? And what now you can do differently? Basically, these are 3 steps that you can use in order to help people reflect about something. Let me know if you have any questions, any ideas about these models.
I have one question. What if somebody cycles through this indefinitely with great enthusiasm, but doesn't actually improve? Like they're very excited to try something, and then every time they come back to you in the next coaching call, they're like, nope, well, it didn't work. I didn't do it. And you can't get through with the making sense of facts and implications through to the core kernel of why it is that they're not really able to engage with the new idea.
I would say then you escalate on the meta level. So if you observe that there is a certain pattern going on, like they doing something but nothing improves, discuss the pattern. Don't discuss the specific situation, but discuss the pattern. So for example, we already tried 3 times this thing and it seems like the result is similar. What do you think about it? What maybe you need to start doing differently? Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you. That helps a lot.
So that's what's happening in coaching conversations, because again, in coaching conversations, there might be a lot of resistance, and similar things in one-on-ones with our subordinates as well. There might be some resistance, and resistance not in a bad word, because it doesn't mean that they don't want it, but there's something that holds them back. And sometimes you need to go on the meta level in order to understand, to look at the situation from the side or from the balcony in order to understand what's happening. Thanks for the question, Robin. Any other questions? So there's another thing. It's not of a model, but that's the thing which I like a lot, because it's a bit of a poetry. So there's a Jungian scholar, Robert Moore, who was investigating the archetype of initiation. So how initiation happens in different cultures. And basically initiation is a form of transformation. And a lot of learning experience in a way are transformational, especially if we talk about transition from individual performer to a team lead, to a leader, to a manager. This is a way of fostering new identity that we need to start owning. And what he found, that there are 2 crucial components in this archetype of transition, of passing. So one is a sacred place, and another one is ritual elder. And I think this is a good metaphor for us as managers in our one-on-ones. So in a way, we play this role of ritual elder, a wise man, not necessarily telling them what to do, but creating this kind of sacred space for them, where they can transform. So for me, it's a useful metaphor to treat these kind of conversations, because they still have this kind of flair of change, of initiation. So I like to mention it as well from time to time. So a few challenges about passing the knowledge. So we talked about several of them. So one important one is that usually what we try to pass is procedural knowledge, how to do certain things. And not always we realize what really needs to be passed. Again, the knowledge that we are passing sometimes is something that we unconsciously competent about. It means that we don't really know what to do, and we need to first understand how we do it before we can start passing it. Another challenge is that we see their performance, we see their actions, but we cannot see what's behind it. So we cannot see the mental models, we cannot see beliefs and other things which affect or which cause the resistance on their end. So we may see how they perform, but we don't really understand why. And because we don't understand why, it's hard to really address the most crucial thing. Another important thing is that there's a difference between training and performance. So usually either the setting will be different or conditions will be different, and the way people will be doing something during training does not necessarily mean that they will perform in a similar way during their performance. So for example, if you have 8 hours training for a whole day, something may be natural, they might start doing something, but as they go to the workplace, like the context switches and they completely forget to do something. Or maybe they got carried away with certain things and they forget the different triggers cause the kind of habitual way to react to situation. And another one is correctly assessing their proximity zone. So proximity zone is a notion of what is the next level of challenge which people cannot handle. So there's basically something which we can handle on our own. And the next thing is our next challenge, our proximity zone. So because we have this curse of knowledge, so in many cases we know much more, it's hard for us to understand that certain simple things for us may be challenging for other people. So if we train, if we mentor somebody, sometimes it's hard to understand that something very natural for us, maybe because our personality is different, may be difficult for them. So these are some of the challenges, and I will give you one of the models or one of the approaches which addresses many of them. So it's called cognitive apprenticeship, and it consists of several behaviors which are done by the teacher, by the master, or done by the student or the apprentice. So first is modeling. So modeling means we do something, but we don't just do it, and we explain. We explain our thought process as well as we do, because it's important not only to show the actions, because usually they are only the tip of the iceberg, but actually explaining our mental models behind those actions. So we want to kind of make this tacit and implicit part as visible as possible for them. Another coaching in a bit different sense that I tend to use it, means that during their performance, we observe and give them feedback right when they perform. And third one is scaffolding and fading. So scaffolding is doing something in order to support them. So at certain points, when they will be going out of their zone of comfort, area of comfort, they will need some support. And we can provide them some clues, some advice what to do when they're in this zone of proximity. But once they practice, we also need to start removing those scaffoldings, those kind of support things. So we need to help them practice it on their own and own the level of mastery. And there are 3 actions which are done by the student. So first one is articulating. So again, we don't see their mental models, so we help them verbalize them so that we can notice what's missing in them. So we also make them perform and make them tell about why they approach, why they make the kind of decisions they make. That way we can figure out whether they have any not supportive mental models or beliefs, and we can address the important things that we need to address. Reflecting is helping them assess their performance. Again, important thing, you see this in different models as well. And exploring, setting goals. Again, in self-directed learning, similar thing. You need to help them own the learning process, help set them learning goals, help set the means and resources that need for that, help them take the ownership of their learning. So this is kind of more intensive approach, but sometimes if you do something like this, it can be quite resultive. And probably you already understand or see some parallels. For example, you can do a lot of these things in pair coding, for example, because basically you can have a pair coding session and use this kind of approach. Anything you would like to ask, to share, comment? No. So I think we are almost at the end of what I prepared. So modalities, and what I mean by modalities is different way people usually learn. So there are training and actually massive practice-based practice. I'll cover that in a minute. So training usually is specifically allocated time, usually one big slump of time, and where you try to master certain skills. Coaching is more kind of discovery process, where coach help to discover, to find their own answers. And mentoring is more of a sharing experience, encouraging and being more of a role model for somebody. So here's the model, which is called Dilt's pyramid, or different name is neurological levels. It basically describes different things on different levels. So basically, one of the examples I give is about listening. So you can have certain beliefs about listening, you have certain values about you as a listener, you have certain behaviors as a listener. You can also listen in a specific setting. So you can address listening skills on different levels, and they will give also different kind of results, because the higher you go on this pyramid, the more impact you will have. Because usually if you change something on the top level, the change will also be spread on lower levels as well. So why I'm showing this model is because certain things are better addressed with different approaches, and behaviors and capabilities probably the best way to address them by doing training. So if you talk about negotiation, public speaking skills, there's a lot of opportunity to learn certain things on training, or learn certain things from content, because they are quite structured and there are certain things that you can be guided to do. Again, many of those things also affected by what I mentioned, by mental models, by values, beliefs that we have. Because, for example, if you think that you are the smartest person in the room, probably it means that you won't listen that much. But if you believe that other people have anything to contribute, you also will start asking questions and listen to them more. So sometimes it's important to address that. And mentoring, coaching, in this way, they work much better, because they are able to go deeper and to really dig and understand what's behind the behaviors, what are the root causes, and how to address them. So it's important to also diagnose if you are facilitating some development of your people. Try to understand where is their learning need. Is it on a behavioral level? Is it on the level of capabilities? Is it on the level of beliefs or values? Identity is harder, because probably you need a bit more proficiency and competency to address those things. But you also may notice this, and usually you can talk about cultural fit, because if somebody has a strong identity which is not aligned with your current culture, you will notice that. And maybe that's related to Robin's example as well, when some person had a different kind of expectations which were not aligned with everybody else's expectations. So you need to understand what's needed and what is the best approach for those things. So few more things, few more distinctions, and we will finish here. Evidence-based means that these are the results of mostly cognitive psychologists experimenting with different things and finding the best way to learn. So few distinctions. First one, downloading versus retrieving. So our usual way to learn something is to read, to listen, to hear, basically download the information. And in a way it's good, but only that is not enough. You need to find a way to retrieve the information. So apart from downloading, you need to use it. It may sound obvious, but again, when we prepare for exam in universities and schools, what we do, we learn our notes, we learn our textbooks. So our usual learning strategy is downloading and re-downloading and rereading. But much more useful and much more resultive is retrieving. So even if you don't find something, I mean, if you cannot retrieve something, it's still useful because you will find your real gaps of knowledge. So finding a way to practice retrieval is much more efficient than downloading again and again. And like one of the examples is learning words. If you download them, it doesn't mean that you will be able to use them once you speak your second language, for example. The next one is massed practice versus spaced practice. Again, is it a big lump of time that you use to do something, or is it several sessions spread in time? And a lot of research says that spaced practice is much more effective. So even if you have trainings, look for trainings which are spread in time, because they will give you time to experiment, to try something which is working or not working, return, discuss, and find different approaches. So as you remember, adaptive knowledge usually requires experimentation, and a lot of soft skills building will be also adaptive challenge. And generating versus giving solutions. Again, generation is trying to create your solution before you give in one. So try as much as possible, first present some problem and ask people, inquire them for their own thinking about the situation, rather than jumping in with the solution. Because even if they don't find the best ones, you can still provide yours at the end of the time. But it's important for them to start thinking about it, because that solution will stick much better and they will learn much more. Again, there's much more to learning science, but these are the most important and sometimes not very intuitive distinctions that I wanted to highlight. I think this is it. So we almost done. What are you taking away from this probably a bit dense, a bit rush session with a little break in between?
Okay, Alex, before we start answering, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So my main question, of what approach should I choose to learn guys very quickly for example, for interviews?
Mm-hmm. Let me see how to answer this quickly.
So they will forget everything they learn after joining new project, yeah. But they need to know something before joining and on the interview.
I would say the best way is to make your practice situation as close to real situation as possible. I'm thinking about role playing. So if it's possible, make them role play. If you have several people, maybe you can split them in pairs or triads and help them practice. Maybe even create some kind of checklist of questions that they can ask each other. So that way it's going to be more or less similar to what they will experience during the interviews. And the closer the context of performance to the context of training, the better will be the transfer. Does it make sense?
Okay. Yeah, and at least new approach. Because this approach with just training sessions and then even questions is not helping.
If you want, you can reach out to me offline and we can discuss, because that's a big topic. Probably I won't be able to help you that much in this short time.
Okay, thanks.
I have to drop off the call a little bit early, so I just wanted to say thank you very much, and I really appreciated the entire thing, but the things that I took away were really about how much adults really need to understand why they are learning the things and hooking into those intrinsic motivators that you started with. And I also really appreciated being exposed to the Kolb cycle. That was totally new to me, like having like thinking about it in that cyclical way was really very helpful. So I really appreciate everything, Alex. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah. So there will be some resources I'll be sharing. So I will share the presentation and you will be able to kind of get into more depth if you are interested.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks for joining and have a nice day.
Before we left everyone, is this training approach based on stories somewhere applicable in your models?
You mean this session?
Yeah.
I would say that not really. And I told about it in the beginning, so I tried to squeeze too much today. So probably if I would be doing real training, I will have one model and make people practice it and find real solutions. But I will also probably start even before with some service to really help them understand what is the problem they're trying to solve. Otherwise, it's not really helpful. And I prefer not to do any kind of training sessions before I understand what challenges people trying to solve. Because it may be I'm talking to people who have a different learning need that I might be thinking of. So this is a bit of not the best practice model by me.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
I'll try just to mumble a lot on different stuff. Any other takeaways?
I think it was really great, and maybe some hands-on or some exercise, not necessarily during the talk, the training, but even after, as Robin already informed us, it's really great to be able to reflect on these things, to know how to be able to apply them on a daily basis. So I think the idea was really, really great. The presentation overall was really open-minded, at least for me, because I never expected that those actions or what was I thinking about really had the definition. So that's really great. This way you can start to mix them and to use them wisely, and so maybe some ideas on how to cope with themselves and how to analyze them better at home as a homework, let's say, not necessarily during the discussion to ask you questions, but to have our own reflection time. I think that could really make all the information that we learned today even much more solid. So thanks again. It's really a pleasure and really nice to follow you, and your examples were really, really well. I think we can all relate to these experiences, and it was really welcomed. Thank you.
Thanks, Adriana. So for those who would like to learn more, I prepared some links. So there are 2 blogs which are really good about learning science and all the learning theories and so on. They're really good. And there are also 2 books which I highly recommend about learning and training as well. Make it stick and telling and aim training. So these are both good. For those who would like to stay in touch, I'm always interested to discuss stuff like this. So if you have any kind of follow-up questions, if you want to ask something, or maybe you have second thoughts, feel free to reach out to me or reach out to me on Twitter. A few things you can continue the conversation. First one, if you are interested in developing coaching skills, so I have a free community you can join. So there's a Google form. Actually, I can probably share it with you as well in the chat, but it will be in the slides as well. And if you're looking for some kind of coaching, if you yourself looking how to find a way to profoundly experience your work and your life, feel free to book a consultation with me. So I do free calls, especially nowadays. So I'll be happy to help you if you have any more questions. I'll be happy to stay in touch, so you know where to find me. I will be sharing the slides and the recording I'll see what's the best way to do it. Actually, probably I can even share the slides now so that you can download them from the Zoom. Because it's a bit tricky with Meetup site because it doesn't allow downloading files. And if you will be interested in joining coaching community, you can fill out this form. Thank you all. Thank you all for choosing to spend your time in this meeting. I appreciate your time, appreciate your attention. If you have any kind of parting questions, parting thoughts, feel free to share.
Thank you for sharing the PPT.
Mm-hmm.
We'll have a little bit of time to reread everything without interruption. And yeah, thanks again, Alex. It was really, really nice, really great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Alex.
Thanks. And there's also the next session lined up in this meetup, so you can register to it as well. It's going to be an interesting talk by a different speaker. So thank you all. Feel free to get in touch and have a nice evening, you all.
You too. Have a nice evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.
Thanks.
Goodbye.
Bye all.
Bye.